FactsVerse presents. If you have these antique items in your attic, they could be worth a fortune by now. Over time, it's not uncommon to accumulate a lot of stuff. Many people don't throw much away. Instead, they'll just store the junk in the attic, just in case they might need it one day. Well, as time goes on, these items become more and more useless, and then they can become more and more valuable too, in some cases. In fact, if you have any of these antique items in your attic, they might be worth a fortune by now. Before we get into our list, help us spread the word about FactsVerse by clicking that like button. Also, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss our future videos. Computers. If you have old, vintage computers in your attic that are a few decades old, they could be worth a lot of money. An appraiser named Eric Silver, he sold a first-edition Apple computer at auction for $900,000. Costume jewelry. Most people think that only jewelry made with precious stones and precious metals are valuable, in other words, real jewelry. Costume jewelry, though, has sold for thousands at auction. Before taking every piece you have to an appraiser, you should know that only certain pieces are valuable. Look for jewelry by Miriam Haskell or Elsa Schiaparelli. Lunchboxes. If you carried a lunch to school in the 60s, 70s, or 80s and you carried it in a lunchbox, well, that lunchbox might be worth a lot of money. The most desirable and valuable lunchboxes are the Beatles and the Jetsons. Some lunchboxes have sold for over $3,000. Cookie jars. If you have a cookie jar in your attic from the 40s and 50s, you could be sitting on a lot of money. Yours will be even more valuable if it's a cartoon character or a well-known character from that time. Postcards. If you have a postcard dated before World War I, you might be sitting on a fortune. And the same is true if you have a letter sent from a well-known person. Yo-yo quilt. Back in the 30s, quilters would cut out circles of fabric and then hand-sew them together. They're called yo-yo quilts after the popular toy. Well, if you got one in your attic, it could be worth up to $300. Stetson cowboy hat. The first cowboy hat released to the public in the 1860s. It was designed by John Batterson Stetson. The design had two purposes. When it was folded down, it shielded the cowboy's face from the sun. When flipped up, it was an excellent receptacle for the horses to drink from. Christmas ornaments. Old Christmas ornaments are both sentimental and extremely valuable. Vintage ornaments can sell up to $2,000. If you have a pear-shaped Kugel ornament, you could be sitting on $18,000 for each ornament. Polaroid cameras. You can buy modern Polaroid cameras today, but if you have an older version, it could be worth up to $500. Arcade games. Vintage arcade games are worth a lot of money. Pac-Man, Pong, other popular arcade games from the 80s are very valuable. If you have a working Pong game, you can get about $2,000 at auction. Paintings. Old paintings can be valuable. It's difficult to know, though, if what you've stored in the attic is valuable, so you probably need to take it to an appraiser. It might be worth nothing, but it could also be worth thousands. Vintage ads. Vintage ads are very popular and very valuable. Coca-Cola ads can be worth up to $15,000. If you have any vintage ads in your home, have them checked out. They could be worth more than you think. Silverware. If you have a set of silverware that has been passed down from generation to generation, it might be worth a lot of money. If it is a Tiffany or Gorham, it could be worth a lot more. First edition books. If you have an old book and you think it's a first edition, it could be worth a lot of money. The first print from older books from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, they can sell for up to $15,000. Vinyl records. Old vinyl is worth a lot of money to collectors. There are people who will pay thousands of dollars to add the right vinyl to their collection. Now, if you're not sure what the records are worth, there's a site called Reverb LP that can help you figure out what your vinyl is worth. Record players. Vinyl records aren't the only thing in your attic that's worth money. You gotta have something to play them on, and record players are a big-ticket item. Good record players are worth a lot. Even the less desirable models, such as the RCA Vitor Slide-O-Matic, it's still worth up to $130. Air Jordans. In the world of collectible sneakers, Air Jordans can be considered antiques. An early pair of Air Jordans can sell for thousands of dollars depending on the model and the condition. toasters. Many modern toaster brands are selling vintage-looking toasters, but if you actually have a vintage toaster, particularly in a saccharine shade, it could be worth an awful lot of money. VHS tapes. There was a time when VHS tapes dominated the home movie market. When the DVD was introduced, VHS tapes were placed on the back burner. Well, today, certain VHS tapes could be worth up to $50,000. If you have VHS tapes in your attic, it's worth checking them out. Halloween costumes. Do you remember the Halloween costumes of the 70s and 80s that came with those plastic masks? I remember mine. I tried to scare all the neighbors with a Mickey Mouse mask. True story. Anyway, if you got some old costumes in your attic, they could be worth a fortune. So did we hit on anything in this list that you might have in your attic? If so, tell us in the comments below and subscribe for more.